Hi, my name is Jayson Mekdeci. I am the executive chef and general manager of Clancy's Restaurant and Bar in Roslyn, British Columbia. And we're here at the Saturday Farmers Market locally to find some produce for both our menu and for various specials for the week, and to show you how to cook with your local product from your local farmers in the terroir of your area. Looking at what we have here, we have really good green beans, I believe spinach, yeah?
Basil.
Basil, that's actually basil.
Yeah.
So that I might pick up for some pestos, so I'm gonna take 2 pounds of that. Definitely taking the cherry tomatoes for sure. And then what types of beans were these?
They're sugar snaps.
Sugar snaps. So
yeah,
this
so
is
the whole thing.
exactly. So these are actually on my menu as well for the stir fry. So I'm definitely gonna be taking sugar snaps, probably about 2-3 bags. And then I have baby cucumbers on my menu, so I'll be passing on the large ones for now.
Yeah.
And then we use on our menu standard, we actually use the wash and trim lettuce from the Diggers and Grand Forks, and this stuff is actually amazing, and it's good for both our burgers, our salads, you name it. We use it for basically everything. So next stop, Leanna's Little Market and Memo Ranch. We already picked up some basil and tomatoes. Now I'm thinking, what do we have left? What protein do I want? I'm gonna go with flank steak. It's probably one of your most underrated steaks on a cow. So we're gonna start with that. So now we have basil and tomatoes. I'm gonna think about where do I wanna go from here? What goes well with beef? So I can think starches, I can think fruits, I can think things like that. So we're gonna grab probably about 2 peaches. I'm gonna probably do grilled peach. Some blueberries, and we're gonna make a gas streak. And I'm thinking now we're gonna move into sort of a salad or a saute of vegetables. Definitely going to grab some Swiss chard. So one of our last stops here we're gonna do is we're gonna try to find a pairing for the dish that we're gonna create. Always pair a sauce to a wine usually, because that's the most coating part of the dish. And after that, you judge your bodies as the dish goes on as to whether or not the wine's gonna be overpowered by a particular component, or the food is gonna be overpowered by the wine. So this is Ben, and he is actually a local vintner here in Trail for Columbia Gardens, and he provides 4 of our 8 wines on our current list. So what I'm probably gonna do is, I know how fruit forward the Fauche Reserve is, good body on it. It's very similar to the Cabernet Sauvignon and those big Barolos. So considering we're gonna have a very deep blueberry gastrique with this dish, burnt peach, seared flank steak, I think this is gonna be an excellent pairing, that it won't be overpowered by the smokiness or the fruit-forward flavors and the acids and the tannins in the blueberry gastrique. And as well, it's actually gonna be very useful for making that gastrique. So we're definitely gonna go with the Fauche Reserve. So the last thing we think about with a meal sometimes is either dessert or an aperitif or something to finish a meal with, and a lot of times a good cocktail or a good spirit. With this dish, we have a local distillery here in the Kootenays. It is the Wynndel Distillery in Wynndel, just outside of Creston. So what I'm looking at is, what would be interesting to have after this meal? What follows up something as bodied as the Fauche Reserve? And also what can go really well with the dish itself. So I'm thinking, as we sear the beef and we create our sauce and build our sauce, not only with the fruit-forward plums and cherries of the wine work really well with it, but also the aged apple rum that they carry would work really well as well. So that concludes our shopping day here at the local farmers market. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna head back to Clancy's in Roslyn, and we're gonna start whipping up what we're gonna do for the day and see how we go with what we've got. I think it's gonna be very interesting. I think there's a lot of flavors, profiles that we've covered here, and a lot of local terroir that we're gonna use. And let's see what happens. So now that we're back at the restaurant, what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at everything we have and decide how we're gonna process it. I've got my flank. It doesn't look like it needs a lot of trimming. It's usually a steak that doesn't. We're gonna leave that beef for now. I'm letting it temper at room temperature. I'm going to definitely char these peaches. They're lovely, and they're gonna have a beautiful, beautiful aroma when they're done, and a little bit of smokiness. We're gonna break down the chard. The stem and the leaf definitely does not cook at the same speed, so I'll show you how to do that momentarily. We're going to create a gas streak out of the blueberries. And the basil and the cherry tomatoes, they are both sweet and perfumey, and I think they'll work really well raw. So we're gonna work with those as sort of a garnish or a component to the dish as is. To help finish the dish with our farmer's market products, we have really, really good Canadian maple syrup, apple cider vinegar made from the Sea Cider Rum Runner that I have on tap, which is a BC cider. I make vinegar out of all of our tap beer as we change our kegs. We're gonna use this in the cooking as well. Definitely gonna be using some of the apple rum in our cooking today. Part of our gas streak will need some red wine flavor, so we'll be using the Fauche Reserve from Columbia Gardens in Trail. I will be deglazing the vegetables with white wine. Beef fat is gonna be what we're gonna use to sear everything with. It's got a million times more flavor, but this is gonna be the money. This is gonna give us a lot of beef flavor to the dish. Black pepper, of course. A little bit of butter for the gas streak, typical BC butter. BC hazelnuts, salt, and so on and so forth. So typically you can use a cast iron pan. I find sometimes they do stick, so what I'm going to use is a fully stainless steel non-stick pan, and we're just going to get it blazing hot, and this is going to caramelize the sugars on the flesh of the peach as we cut it, and it's going to give us a really nice smoky flavor. To prep the peaches, what we're going to do first is we're going to split them open. Should just, oh yeah, they're beautiful and in season right there. So you can see, we're just going to split them open, and you can use a spoon or your fingers. In this case, a spoon might be more opportune. And I'm just going to remove that stone. Same thing, just by twisting. Don't worry if you get a little bit of flesh on it. It's not a big deal. And I'm going to now cut them into segments. Once you have them cut into segments, we're going to take these chunks and we're actually going to season them with a little bit of salt. And now they're ready to go in the pan. So what we're going to do with the pan is we're just going to give it a touch of beef fat. And you see the smoke? That's good. It means we're really, really hot. And that's what's going to give us our char on the peaches. So I'm just going to drop them in one at a time. If you have tongs, you can always do this. I'm pretty much burn-proof as well, so it doesn't make too much of a difference to me. And they will light up a little bit. What it is the sugar is now caramelizing and going through the Maillard reaction, and we're getting a nice smoky flavor out of it. So just grabbing a pair of tongs or tweezers, I'm going to look at the bottoms and just see where we're at. You don't want to cook the peaches through. You just want to get them a little bit black and nice and smoky. And I would say right now we've got a nice char on both sides. So the next item we're going to process is our chard. So with the stem and the leaf of the chard, they don't cook the same. What you're going to do is you're going to simply separate them by cutting a V out of the stem itself. And you just separate the greens away from the stems. Once you have the stem itself, I'm going to just chop it up into little chunks and we'll saute it from there. Chard is one of those things that's very pretty, but it doesn't have a lot going on to it. So we're going to add a lot of flavor to it. A lot of the salt, some fats, a little bit of the vinegars, and we're going to cook it down, and we're going to get some, we're going to build a flavor to it. We're going to process the cherry tomatoes, remove their stems, cut them in half, and then get them ready for the dish. We're going to take off these little stems, and very simply just cut them in half. Typically what you want to do, especially with cherry tomatoes, is you want to cut them right on the point of the stem, or at least where it used to be as you remove them. Now that we've finished processing all the vegetables, we're going to start working on the beef flank steak. And this one's dried quite nicely, 21-day wet age, which means it's about AA or AAA in age. I'm just going to trim off a little bit of some of this connective tissue on the outside. And the nice thing about a flank steak is that it's so thin, it makes a nice quick steak. It's going to cook really quickly. We don't have to put it in the oven. And it makes really good things like tacos, fajitas, so on and so forth. It's a really, really good steak to just slice up and throw into something. So I'm going to take my chunk out of here, and I'm going to show everybody there's a grain to this. There is a fiber that runs, or all the muscle fibers run in one direction. And that's a structure. To make this more tender, what you want to do is break up that structure. Instead of having your long grains and cutting them along that, we're going to cut right across the fibers like so, even as we slice it. So I'm going to take a nice portion of this, and we're going to use that for our steak. What I like to do now that it's a little bit room temperature is we're going to season it with a little bit of salt, and we're going to leave it for about 15 minutes. And what this is going to help do, the salt's going to start to go through osmosis, and it's going to start soaking up some of the juices and working its way into the middle of the meat. So the last stage before we start cooking is we're going to get our Fauche Reserve ready. This is a really, really big wine. When you have big, bold wines, you want to decant them ahead of time. So as we begin to cook, what we're going to do is we're going to decant the wine. So it's definitely one of the most robust and big and bold wines you're ever going to get, and it's a very unique terroir to this area, as it is 100% Fauche. Let's get about a glass going here, and we're just going to pour it through the decanter. Give it a bit of a swing. And we're just going to let that sit and aerate and come to the right temperature, and we're going to get this ready to go for later on. We're going to begin by searing our steak. So I've got a really, really hot pan. I've got beef fat. That smoke means we're around 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 220 Celsius. In the pan, we're getting a nice sear. You want to keep that heat up nice and high. Seared the one side. Let's give it a quick flip, see how we look. You can see that uneven cooking. That's actually an air pocket as it buckles. So you want to give it a bit of a stir. The flames are fine. We're going to flip it again. And we're not just going to do one side and leave it. Ideally, you want to keep rolling the steak around and keep the juices concentrated in the middle and just gently cook it in the pan. Flipping it every 30 seconds or so until we get it nice and brown. As we work towards our desired color, we're just going to keep flipping. And you can see we're starting to get those lines, that it's going a little bit dark, and that's perfect. This is exactly the aroma and the look you want on the steak. We're going to dump out a little bit of that fat. This is our apple rum. And we're just going to give it a little bit of that, the glaze. Let some of the alcohol burn off. With that sweet apple rum, we're going to add a little bit of beer vinegar that we make here in Clancy's. And this is going to acidulate this mix, bring some malt flavors out, and help accentuate the caramels. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave it on a low heat for about a minute covered. And then I'm going to turn it off and let this slowly come up to about medium rare. And that's where you're going to want this type of steak. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to rest our steak just on a rack. Pour all those nice juices over top. It does actually absorb a percent of those juices again, but what we're doing is we're resting the steak, allowing some of the juices to flow out. So next we're going to process the vegetable. You don't want to do something like sear in olive oil, for example, avocado oil, any flavored oil. Those oils are finishing oils. You want to use either canola or something like the beef fat we have here, or even grapeseed oil. They're really, really good searing oils. The beef fat, however, retains its flavor as we're searing, and it's going to add a lot of interesting character to our vegetables. So what I have in here is I have the shard stem itself and some garlic scapes we get from Happy Hills Farms here in Roslyn, British Columbia. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. And all this smells right now, it smells of roast beef, and it's going to give that shard a lot of flavor. At this point, I'm also going to add a little bit of black pepper. We can finish the beef with it as well, but the black pepper is actually going to toast, and it's going to create an interesting character. So now I've cooked down a little bit. I'm going to add the leaves. I don't want to cook it too much. We want to keep some of those colors and some of that flavor in there, and we don't want to overdo the garlic scape. So I'm going to turn the heat off. We're going to add some of the Pinot Gris that we serve here. And because they're greens, we're going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar that we make here in-house from the Seasider Rum Runner. And this acidity is going to help balance the fat and salt. And it will be offset by the sweetness of the peaches and the gas streak we're about to work on. And then we're going to add an emulsifying agent to this. I'm going to throw in a quick knob of butter and turn it off. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an emulsion with this now. The butter itself is already emulsified fat, milk, and milk solids. And as you can see, we're getting this really, really heavy glaze. And this is what we want ideally. And it might seem like too much liquid, but don't worry, we will drain this a little bit later on. So we're going to let it off to the side with our beef, and we're going to go on to the next step. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to toast some BC hazelnuts. The best way to process these is usually on a cutting board. All I'm going to do is put my thumb down on them until they split. And once you have a couple halves, you can throw them in here. Helps keep them from rolling off the plate. Also makes it look a little interesting. And we're going to take a few of these. We're going to toast them in the same pan that the beef was already in. So let's get those toast in a pan for a second. We're going to add a little bit of salt. I'm going to add a dash of our beef fat. So they're lightly toasted, they're glazed. I'm going to take them and just set them aside for now. And in our blazing hot pan, we're now going to drop a whole bunch of blueberries from Grand Forks, maple syrup. And this is where we get to the point of a gas streak. Apple cider vinegar that we make in-house from Seasider's Rum Runner vinegar. A gas streak, by definition, is a reduction of acid and sugar. So this is the acid we're going to use. And then to give it a bit of color, we're also going to add a little bit, some of that Fauche Reserve. It's going to help with the body as well. And I'm going to let this reduce right down. The next we're going to do is we're going to throw in a knob of butter from here in BC. And I'm going to turn the heat down now that we've achieved that syrup-like texture. And what this is going to do is it's going to add shine. By doing what's called a monte au beurre, or butter mounting, you add shine to it, you help mellow out the flavors and emulsify fat. Now we're ready to plate. What I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with the sauce. And we're going to use a little bit of this later to sort of dress the dish. So the gas streak's just going to go down as randomly as we want. Next, we're going to go with the shard. and the scape mix. The beef is currently on the stove, just getting a little warm. And we're going to start laying down some charred peaches. We're going to take some of the cherry tomatoes. I'm going to season them gently. Next step on this dish, what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve our flank steak, and I'm going to slice very, very thin on an angle. And it looks like our color is just about where we want it. Medium, medium rare. Oh yeah, beautiful. You can see that. It's pink all the way through, so we're just about medium, but there's not that huge, huge color differentiation between the edge and the center. We're going to lay it out here around the first bit of the chard, and we're going to lay another one over here to use the height of the plate. Now the steak's on the plate. We're going to work quick here so we don't lose too much heat. Some of those beautiful beef fat glazed hazelnuts. I'm going to garnish with a little bit of this nice basil. It's going to add a really interesting perfume to the dish, and it works well with the sort of balsamic characters of our blueberry gastrique with tomatoes. It's very classic, and the butter and the chard, sort of your bocconcini and hazelnut and so on flavor profile onto this dish. This is wild vetch that I forage here in Roslyn. Got some oregano flowers from one of our cook's gardens. The flowers from the vetch itself, which are also edible and lovely. Bachelor's button, another wildly occurring flower here in Roslyn. Some edible flowers. Lastly, we'll garnish as we keep this sort of salad theme and very light summery dish. I'm going to get some of these beautiful greens from the Diggers in Grand Forks. And there you have it. That is beef flank steak with seared local peaches, cherry tomatoes, local greens, and a blueberry gastrique. The foch is now sat for about 45 minutes, making this the ideal time to drink it. The decanter has now done its job. It's going to be vibrant of various fruits, blackberry, plums, and so on. And I guarantee you it's a meal you'll never forget. Something to consider as well at the end of this meal is to understand that every single thing in front of me has come from either British Columbia or Canada itself. We haven't used anything foreign, and we are exhibiting here the terroir of this area. So I hope you enjoy this, and let's move on to our cocktail. All right, so a great way to finish this meal, especially considering the flavor profiles we have and what we've picked up today, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create an apple rum and an apple gin sour using maple, locally foraged elderflower, and actually an apple cider vinegar, once again, that we ferment in-house. We're gonna start with a little bit of ice in our shaker, a little bit of egg white. Just give it a quick dry shake, and that's gonna help fluff up our egg white. The next ingredients we're gonna add to this, I'm gonna say about a half ounce, let's say 3/4 ounce actually, of the house-made apple cider vinegar. This is elderflower syrup that we make ourselves. It's actually elderflowers that I've foraged in Warfield. We're gonna add an ounce to the cocktail. Because we already added the syrup, I'm gonna give it just a little bit of maple, maybe a 1/4 ounce. And this is good Quebec maple I picked up here in this low can from some folks who actually make it out there and bring it over. So we're gonna go now with a 3/4 ounce of the Old Tom's apple gin from Wynndel Distilleries. And we're gonna finish off with, of course, the apple rum, once again from Wynndel Distilleries. 3/4, one more time. Now all our ingredients are in there. We're gonna shake this vigorously. And what happens when you do this, people always wonder what happens in a sour. The egg white proteins are gonna capture the air, and every time it shakes, the ice cubes and other content are gonna cut open air bubbles and keep splitting them out and splitting them out and splitting them out. So the more we shake, the fluffier and more voluptuous our cocktail is going to be. So give it about 30 seconds at least. We're going to take standard rocks glass, get a little ice in it, and from here we are going to strain it, and this is what you're looking for. That beautiful froth is going to come right to the top, and then you shake it out, shake it out, shake it out, shake it out. We're going to top it off with Vancouver Island smoked sea salt, just to give it a bit of extra flavor. And what that helps do as well is it balances the acids and the sugars. And make sure you shake out all that fluff. In a good sour, that foam should start from the top all the way down to the bottom as you drink. And there you go. A smoked local apple sour with elderflower. Enjoy.